SIG has brought us another P365, but this one's a little different, and I'm going to tell you how. Alright, so here we have the SIG P365 Fuse. Now I did mention it's a little bit different and I'm going to jump right into that. But before I do want to mention quickly to my YouTube manual reviewer that this gun, along with all the other guns, are in their factory configuration. I've added either an optic or a light on the front like you see here, but nothing is internally modified on any of the guns in this video. Now the first thing that will catch your attention is the size of this, and to kind of give you reference, I'm going to pull out my XL here, and it has a macro grip, and so you end up having just a little bit more length on the end here, as you can see. So the first thing you're going to notice is that this total slide is longer. To give you an idea, that barrel is going to be 4.3 inches versus the XL that comes in at 3.7. So there is actually a good amount more real estate on the front of this. There are a lot of visible features you get with it that typically in the past you'd had to pay over $1,000 for in the 365 lineup. For example, you definitely get more characteristic here on the serrations, and they are very usable. This is actually macro grip size for all those curious out there, so you can do different back straps with this, but why I want to point this out is this LXG grip module. Beforehand, you had to pay well over $1,000, and we started to see that in the Spectre lineup. And I'll pull out my 365 Spectre here just to kind of give you an idea of the grip texture here. So it is laser engraved, and there is some voweling in that. So what is the material gain for this design? Well, I really appreciated it when I went to go shoot this gun. I also brought out my Glock 45 just for fun. To give you some context, it was about 92, 93 degrees that day, so I was really hot, I was really sweaty. I will say I noticed immediately how much easier it was to get my grip up in here, because the Glock 45, when your hands get sweaty, do feel harder to hold. I felt that all this channeling within it actually made it easy for me to hold the gun, and so anytime I did a drill with this, regardless of how hot or sweaty I was able to engage right away. So that's already a huge positive. Now, one thing I already appreciate too on this is you get their mag well. The first time I ever saw that was on their X Macro TAC Ops model. And what's nice about that is it does help assist in getting your hand a little bit higher up into the grip, and as well as it is incredibly functional for reloads. All right, so you get 3 magazines with it. The traditional 17-round magazine that we've seen since the introduction of the X Macro. Now, this was interesting. I thought this was just an extended base pad like we see with some of our competition setups, but it's actually a full 21 round length magazine, and it's listed with the dot all the way to the bottom so you can see that you have all those rounds. I think that's pretty neat too, because that adds to the stability of the magazine when the housing extends that far down. But what I love about that is that this extended portion here is gripped well, so getting an ideal grip if you were to grab it for a reload is easy. And if you got in a situation where, hey, I need to go strip this thing out, well, now you've got all this real estate to grab on the bottom. Now let's talk about what the biggest change is on this gun. It is the longer barrel. That is a new barrel length for the 365 lineup. Now you're thinking, wait a minute, we got something in the 320 lineup, right? Well, they were intentful in their consideration of making this a 4.3 setup. And the things that catch my attention on that are the sight radius. Now, if you're not familiar with that, that is the distance from the front sight to the rear sight. Now, if you're running irons only, the longer that sight radius is, the easier it is to actually stabilize and shoot accurately at distance, as I did on a few drills here. Now, the extended barrel length too, as I tested it with some Blazer 115, gave it about a 20 to 30 feet difference in velocity over the 3.7 barrels. Now, as you'll see, I did put a TLR7 on here just to kind of give you guys an idea of the size of this gun, because on the macro size or the 3.7 barrel size guns, you know, they tend to protrude out a little bit. Personally, I'm not a fan of that because gas and carbon can get on the side of the light and actually obstruct it a little bit. So I actually prefer them to be rearward. As you can see, I have plenty of room to play with this, whether I want to go forward or reverse with it, but it definitely fits in there nice. Now, as far as the trigger, if you guys have watched my reviews, I do like to dive into the trigger because I kind of think of myself as a trigger snob, but this is pretty much their standard setup with their flat face trigger. So rolling you through that, if you've never seen that before, is that you get a good amount of pre-travel here, and it's fairly light, so you get to the first wall, and there is just quite a bit of creep. And so as you roll through it, see it, still there, and breaks, okay? That reset is nice and audible though. I've always appreciated that. Got to let it out a good amount of ways, but you do got to make your motion right back through the creep in order to break it again. Now here's the thing, do these changes make any difference in the shooting experience? Well, let's jump into that. Now before I do, I want to ask that if you like this video, please hit that like button, as that helps me a lot, and you're going to want to subscribe because I'm constantly coming out with new shooting content all the time along with reviews, so you're going to want to subscribe. I had to remind myself that this is not a full-size gun. This is a 365, not a 320 or the Glock 45 I shot this next to that day. Now, I say that because at first I treated it like that and I was trying to drive the gun as such. And once I figured that out, that wasn't the best way, I backed my speed off a little bit and adjusted my grip to get the maximum performance out of this gun. It does shoot more like my 365 XL, so it is fairly lively in recoil, considering that even that this recoil spring is actually longer than the prior generation. So surprised to see that they had sprung it so heavily, as it was fairly snappy and there was definitely a fair amount of recoil impulse in the hands. But once I locked down, I was able to go through a lot of the drills with pretty good numbers. If anything, this gun actually surprised me quite a bit, especially when I went to my transition drill. And if you're not familiar with that, I'll leave a link more about that and what that is. But compared to my Glock 45, I was able to squeeze out more accuracy, and I appreciate that because this is a 23-ounce setup, so incredibly light, but yet the athleticism to be respectably on par with other guns I've had out there. But some of you know that I have a long competition background, and I did take a look about where this would fall if you decided you want to pursue that path. Well, really not going to talk too much about USPSA because we like our gamer guns, but in IDPA, this does fit in the CCP box in case you're curious. I did have to take off the optic earlier just to verify that, but it more than fits in there. Now, I do want to speculate though that probably knowing SIG and knowing how much is the difference between this real estate is from the end of here to here, that means there's probably enough room for their integrated comp. So I'm going to guess that maybe in the future we may see a 3.7 barrel setup with their integrated comp on this footprint. But until then, if you are interested, I recently just did a review on their P365 AXG Legion, which has that feature. And if you want to spend a little bit more money or look at other options, I just came out with this performance carry video and you can click it right here. And until then, guys, we will see you all at the range.